Hey guys, 24 feet? Everybody's ignoring me. I'll find out. Alright, that was Jerry Randolph first of his extra.
Yeah! Hello everybody, it's Mango Thunder Slice, and I'm at the High Times event here in Sacramento, or at least trying to get to it. But for these nincompoops over here, let's see if I can zoom in. We've got people protesting the High Times event. I guess they're social justice warriors. No justice, no peace. I eventually was able to ascertain that's what they are saying. And yep, that's the state of modern America, protesting the free flow of traffic for something. Yes, cheers. Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice, and today we're going to be talking about ancient Celtic society and the blockchain revolution, and I guess subtitle, Making America Great Again for Real. But basically, so those were some clips from the Scottish Games recently here in Sacramento, or technically in Woodland, east of Sacramento, west of Sacramento rather. Basically went to the High Times Cannabis Cup yesterday, and it's interesting, just kind of a contrast of events, and well, I got, the American flag behind me, and I thought I'd get that in the shot because, this whole thing happened recently, the Alfie Evans in the UK, and it really just reminded me that we are dealing with a sort of dichotomy, right? There's basically the attitude that the state owns the people that live within its territory, and then there's the attitude that people own themselves and they should be the ones to decide what to do with their lives and their family. And then and now, that dividing line, it could be accurately represented as, a Celtic worldview versus an Imperial worldview, whether it's English or Roman or, Chinese. It doesn't matter. It's basically two fundamental attitudes, and it's a profound psychological difference of people that believe that they need to be controlled versus others who believe that they are capable of governing themselves. Right. So the Scottish Games is great. It's just interesting because I can't really handle mass events anymore. Just being in a crowd of people does nothing for me. Nothing at all. It just, parking pisses me off, and, it's just, it's just a big money pit for a whole bunch of people to go and throw money in, and, but it was interesting to go to the Scottish Games because there's still real binding ties there, and with identity politics being, so in vogue, it's interesting to see just kind of, there's like Black Power, right? And then there's like all these different prides in people's various heritages, but anything that's like proud of European ancestry is like racist and white supremacist, right? But the Scottish Games is great, and it's not just Scottish, it's like, incorporates a lot of different things, obviously all the British Isles, Welsh, Irish, Scottish, English, and then also like Norse, like there's a whole Norse segment, and, they do mock offerings to Odin and stuff, like, burning a body and "Hail Odin!" It's pretty interesting. Having trouble with this joint today. I'm just talking too much. But it's like, and we're getting ready for the birth, which should happen in July, knock on wood. And, it's just interesting thinking about this whole Alfie Evans thing that, people are clamoring for socialism, right? And the natural consequence of what they're clamoring for is that the state owns you, right? The National Health Service in Britain, right, claims to own Alfie Evans, or claimed, rest in peace, little Alfie. and they refused to allow his parents to take him to a different country and a different hospital to receive care. That is beyond the pale imperial shenanigans. I mean, the fact that anyone could defend that, it's absolutely flabbergasting. And it's been going on for a long time, right? And like, the whole reason that there was a conflict between the Church of Rome and the Church at Tara in Ireland is because of basically profound but very subtle differences in the calendar of the year and how people chose to express their reverence, and whether or not they had, ultimate control in a decentralized network, or whether it was just top down. The Pope is the representative of God, and whatever he says, no matter what, must be the truth. Ironically enough, the Pope sided with Alfie Evans and the people who, favor freedom in this thing, and he offered to, have Alfie come to Italy, but, such is the irony of the universe, I suppose. Because in the beginning, it was, the Vatican that established the second crown of London, city of London. When they say the crown, they're not talking about the Queen. They're talking about the city of London, right? Which is a sovereign state in and of itself that is separate from England and Britain and the UK and whatever. Same thing with the Vatican. The Vatican is its own place. And also same thing with Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a separate entity that's, the parasitic, capital city of, a nominally decentralized people, right? It's supposed to be federalism. The states are supposed to decide on anything that, doesn't have total national significance, national defense and whatnot. And it's interesting too, because it's a city of London that established the banking cartel, right? It was actually with the Rothschilds and, their misinformation after the Battle of Waterloo with Napoleon, that, that's how they basically bought the entire British economy and for pennies on the dollar. And, now they have the National Health Service, right? All that money is just going to the bankers, right? And of course, now we have the third crown, Washington, D.C., and New York City, another imperial city, right? And it's just really interesting because human evolution, the human spirit is so amazing, and it always finds a way to skirt these, imperial cages that are dropped on top of it, right? From, the Reformation with Martin Luther and the printing press, right? Like, the church didn't necessarily know that a printing press was going to get invented, but it was, because somebody was clever enough to make it. And then what happened? It totally revamped and changed the entire structure of society. And we've been on this whole new quantum timeline ever since that's spawned all sorts of new, different innovations and changes. And a similar thing is happening now, with blockchain. And it's like, people in a one-dimensional frame of thinking, they'll, it's like the printing press can be used for a lot of different things. You can write Nazi propaganda, right? You can write poetry. The Pope can put out his, papal bulls and, all these different things. It's just it's a neutral tool, right? Same thing with guns. You can use a gun to kill somebody in aggressive, violence, or you can use a gun to protect somebody from aggressive violence, right? It takes the agency of a conscious being to, charge an item with negative or positive value. And it's like, similarly, people freak out about the blockchain and Bitcoin, especially older people who don't really understand it, more conspiracy minded, I guess, thinking that it's the mark of the beast currency and just a giant, a giant Jewish conspiracy to get everybody into the grid and using digital money that can be tracked, and by all means, the blockchain can be used for that purpose. It can. Just like a printing press can be used to write Catholic doctrine, or, Protestant doctrine, I guess, go run with the metaphor, right? Blockchain can be used to make, that central Fed coin, right? They can make, which Ripple kind of is Fed coin a little bit, but not quite. They're trying to make it, but nevertheless, there's things like Monero and Zcash and others that have hard-coded built-in privacy aspects where it's not even recorded on the ledger who sent or who received the money, just that money was sent. So it's our choice whether we want to enter that Fed coin world, digital slave state, or to go with something else, really. It's, if you want to walk into that cage, yeah, you're going to be enslaved, all right? But you don't have to walk into that cage. I don't have to walk in that cage. I'm not going to walk into that cage. But people in their fear conditioning, they believe that the cage is inevitable because they've felt like they're in a cage for their entire life, and not necessarily without reason. But no matter what the objective stance, the attitude really determines everything. And with this whole Kanye West and Candace Owens things, and Candace Owens thing, and basically Kanye saying that being a slave was a choice, right? And I found a YouTube channel, a guy named Brandon Tatum. I think he works with Candace Owens. Cool. He's a black guy, conservative, super cool, super smart. Love his take. And he was saying basically that people flip out at Kanye for saying these things, but realistically, what was it? Even Harriet Tubman was like, I freed a lot of slaves. I could have freed 10 times more if they knew that they were slaves. So it's like, is Harriet Tubman racist, right? Maybe. I don't know. You'd have to ask her. But it's a mindset of freedom versus a mindset of slavery. And again, that's what we're talking about here. Are you, basically into the narrative of your own oppression and your own victimhood, which people do on an individual level and on a collective level? Oh, I'm such a victim. Oh, I'm such a victim. This is the reason why I can't do anything right now to better my situation, right? It's a psychological narrative and rationale to people for people to justify their own inaction. And similarly, there are empowering belief systems which become a positive feedback loop, justifying further constructive action, right, to increase one's sovereignty and power and happiness and wealth and etc. And I feel that Celtic society is a profound example of a positive feedback loop, and it still exists. And no matter how many times the empire beat it down, the population of Ireland never recovered after the potato famine, right, which was really English imperial genocide. Right, it was 8 million back then. I think it's like 4 million now or something. It's all the Irish came to the New Ireland, which was here in the United States of America. Right, and it's just interesting out in Woodland. There's enough people of Scotch and Irish and Welsh descent to who actually still have that connection, to actually have an event like that. And people go out in all their tartans, right, the kilts, right, and then each of the kilts has a specific pattern of the family, right. That's their family pattern, and they all kind of do this parade and march, right, the parade march of the clans or whatever, Yeah, here's the other, thing that will set off liberals is just the idea of the word clan has been tainted, but it just means family. It's just family. And it's just interesting with a, parade and everybody's showing off their basically ancestral history and, just taking pride in what them and their family has done in that line, of genealogy. And, I've got my kilt, just like when Space Panther and I were married. I wasn't going to wear an English monkey suit, some cornered tuxedo, and then no disrespect to anybody else's wedding, but I dressed up in my kilt. I was in full Highland attire, and that's how I rock it, right? And I went out in my kilt. I finally completed my whole the last part of my whole set. I've got like all my gear, and I've got kind of a belt, knife on my belt, right? With this, yeah. I finally got a sword. Got some Damascus steel, right? This thing is pretty sweet. So they actually make these weapons, and these are the guys who make the weapons that they do mock sword fights and sword battles over in the Norse Quarter, and there's people wearing armor. I just think that's so cool, the Damascus steel. What's interesting This is kind of, a replica. It's still a solid sword. Pretty cool handle too. Um, we still don't know how to replicate like the steel that was made back in the day. When they meld the two types of steel together, it's extremely malleable but strong, right? So it works well for, weapons. And that knowledge was lost, right? We certain metallurgists have said, that they've recovered it, and we obviously we can make good steel for a variety of different purposes, but it's just important to remember that our ancestors were not idiots and that we are our ancestors, and um, the things that happened a long time ago in the past aren't like these trivial historical details. They're actually a fundamental part of who we are, where we are now, and why we act the way we are, right? And, the Celtic blood and the Celtic spirit, right, was opposed to the empire arguably longer than any else, right? Right now there's Russia and China opposing the Western, empire. But still, they are very authoritarian regimes in and of their own right. I wouldn't necessarily say that the Russian spirit or the Chinese spirit is like libertarian or aspiring for individual like freedom and expression of, personal uniqueness. But the Celtic spirit absolutely is. There were women who ran the abbeys, the churches, back in ancient Celtic society, right? There wasn't feudalism, right? The legal system of ancient Celtic society was fundamentally different than the feudal imperial system, right? The person who owned the land did not own the people who lived on it, right? It was actually more of almost, I don't know, an anarcho-capitalist sort of market um, social insurance program, you know. And I'm not by any means a scholar. There's a YouTube channel called Brehon Law Academy. Fantastic stuff, great content, and just exploring and hashing out the different aspects of Celtic society and show how they very much were a decentralized sort of anarchist society. I mean, there was a high king, but he didn't have executive imperial power. He was more of a figurehead, for events and processions and whatnot. But ultimately, it was a decentralized model, and the different clans, basically had their own sort of dominion, and it was your family, your extended family, that was the governing apparatus. And if you did something wrong, you offended or harmed somebody else's, clan or another individual, there were methods of arbitration, and they had judges called brehons, and they were just extremely learned scholars, well respected among all the people, and they would arbitrate cases basically. So the law and the organization of society doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be an imperial, authoritarian, patriarchal government or whatever, right? I mean, the law of the land is really just the result of all our decisions spanning thousands of years, all these conflicts that we've had, this great drama, and the lessons that we learned from it. And that's good. We should keep that. That's, as an anarchist, that's not anything that I oppose, right? I want to use that wisdom to build a better world, and that's why I believe that we should reevaluate that original concept of decentralization. And the place where that is happening more than any other is the blockchain. Another cute little irony, you've got what's his name, Oliver, last week tonight with John Oliver, right? Another overbearing, just pompous British twat, and who's not even funny, just spouting the typical, like blue team statist talking points down everybody's throats, and sort of some jokes in between. So he did an episode a couple weeks ago about blockchain, specifically mentioned EOS, right? And I think EOS was like $5 at the time, hit its all-time high of 18 back in December, and then the bubble kind of popped, and now it's actually back up at 18. It over tripled since John Oliver made his episode. But which is just funny. So you have this British mouthpiece, right, spouting Imperial talking points, as mind control for the watchers. And then what happens? People not only don't listen to him, but the price goes on to triple after that. And the EOS basically, main network goes live in June. And this is what's going to enable us, just like the printing press back in the day, to completely reorganize society, right? A way of transacting, showing ownership, governance, basically information, transfer. Everything is going to be able to be done decentralized. We don't need the imperial system when we have a open source free market alternative, right? So it's like, again, if the NSA invented this all, if the Jews invented all this to control and enslave us, it's like they really shot themselves in the foot, because we're going to use this to free everyone, right? Again, you can't say that the printing press is inherently good or inherently evil, right? It can be used for a number of different things. And, so it is with blockchain. While all these people think and will inevitably be wrapped into the digital communist, slave grid, right? At the same time, we're designing with that same infrastructure the means to our own liberation. Because all you really got to do is achieve the economic freedom. If you have economic freedom, you will by sheer default have political freedom. If, nobody is the one who controls your food and your shelter but you, right? With welfare, that's the state, right? They buy people's favor, right? They give them shit until, so that they'll support it, which is why, immigrants, support the blue team, 2-to-1. Over 2-to-1 is because they give them free stuff, right? They come into the country, but it has to get paid from somewhere, usually just more debt. And the payments for that debt is the income tax, and we're all familiar with that. But picture this. There's no taxes. There's just crowdfunding, okay? Whether it's local defense, right, police, or even National Guard for a larger military infrastructure, supplies of goods and services, utilities, right? Decisions on, let's say legalizing cannabis or whatever. You can have governance done on the blockchain, on specifically the EOS infrastructure. This potential exists, absolutely. And it's going live next month. And it's a very exciting time to be alive, right? Even if we weren't about to have a beautiful baby child, a little, hopefully, redhead kid, and we'll get him a little kilt, assuming that it's a boy. We feel through dreams that it's a boy, he's a boy. I'd be equally happy to have a beautiful little redheaded daughter, or non-redheaded, just joking. But, but no, not really. It's just, life is a profound miracle, and the empire, is a giant death cult, right? Trying to basically secure its own power and prove that, it has dominion over life and consciousness. But life and consciousness and the God force, right, the divinity that animates it, is always just giggling and running around and jumping over the fence and, digging under the wall, and, life finds a way. And it's that attitude that's going to make America great again, right? It's that attitude that made America great to begin with, is the spirit of free enterprise, is people governing themselves, right? It's not, oh yeah, the America's great because the British Empire came in and founded it. No, America's great because they fought off the British Empire and declared a new system that didn't need an imperial top-down, pyramidal, control grid. And, what I see happening is a second American Revolution. It's in slow motion in a sense, and not many people are even cognizant of it or hip to it, or, far less participating in it. But back in the day, it was only 3% of citizens in the colonies who actually participated in the revolution and fought off, the world's largest naval power and empire. And that's pretty astounding. And we can do the exact same thing, because the spirit is more powerful than any cage that can be put around it. And as long as we just tune into that in general every day, it's going to manifest itself. It doesn't, you cannot humiliate, you know, an honorable man, and a free man can never really be made a slave, you know. What's his name? Frederick Douglass, right? As soon as he learned to read, he realized that, you know, his owners didn't necessarily have any special gifts on him, right? He was being bound by his own ignorance, right? Celtic society in the medieval dark ages, the Irish monks, right? Brewing beer, walking around, you know, commando style in their monk robes and, you know, just transcribing ancient Latin texts, right? Ireland was a scholarly center when the whole rest of European society fell into, you know, ignorant, you know, shit slinging. And so I'm proud of, you know, what I was able to achieve in those lifetimes, and I'm proud of being able to have an opportunity or, you know, a seat at the table in this lifetime. And there's nothing really to ever freak out about, you know. There's nothing that's really ever that tragic if you can just remember that we're all part of a greater story, and we all return home when we're done with this tour, right? And, you know, it's just really exciting. It's really cool. Should never be depressed. I was depressed for a long time because I wasn't thinking like this. I was thinking like imperial slave mentality because I had to go through public school, and that's just the general default. But hey, c'est la vie. Up and onward, and we're evolving, and we're going to be free. Much love to you all. I'll see you next time. Cheers.